Hi, I'm Allison Carruth. I'm a faculty member at UCLA, where I teach in the English department, the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability, and the Food Studies program, and where since 2016, I've been the founding faculty director of the Lab for Environmental Narrative Strategies, or LENS. I want to start by giving my thanks to Bethany Wiggin and the entire team in the Penn program in Environmental Humanities for inviting me to be a part of this event and for spearheading this remarkable effort to transform what was to be an in-person gathering and exhibit into a digital convening. I'm so honored to be a part of it, and I look forward to our conversations and engagements on the platform and live next week. The title of my talk today is Climate Salvage, Sensory Art. Thank you for tuning in. Picture a future city populated by human survivors of climate displacement, a mix of familiar and strange flora and fauna, and the synthetic creations of an entity called the company. Before its likely alien owners fled the planet, the company's research compound in our imagined city set loose a gigantic, highly intelligent bear named Mord. Designed to be a weapon, Mord has spawned Earth-sign proxies who battle a violent biohacker called the Magician and her genetically engineered child soldiers. Into this conflict zone arrives a creature who is part plant, part animal, part sentient machine. This cyborg chameleon is the title character of Jeff Vandermeer's 2017 novel, Born. The narrative is told by Rachel, a Pacific Islander and climate refugee who finds Born while scavenging for tools and edible matter in Mord's pelt as he sleeps. Bringing what she takes to be salvage to her and her lover Wick's makeshift home, Rachel witnesses Born's rapid evolution from an inert and decorative curio to a complex, shape-shifting being. Inscribing Born with the pronoun him, Rachel comes to see herself as this being's guardian and mentor. But Born proves an unruly ward. He is a voracious reader who develops from a sleek vase into an increasingly ambulant, loquacious, and inventive creature who assumes the disparate forms of those he encounters around the city. We learn with Rachel that Born can take on any biological form by observing, sensing, and in some cases, devouring others. Monstrous as that is in the narrative, Born is also described as complex and beautiful, words that describe his final state change into an enormous passion flower. This final transformation is a self-sacrifice that unfolds after a battle with Mord ends in their deaths. The end of Born brings torrential rain to the city whereby all manner of creature drop from the sky or sprouted from the ground. In the wake of this surreal flood, a provisional multi-species society begins to take shape around Rachel, Wick, some of the magician's mutating children, and also the strange, forgotten animals abandoned by the company. What interests me about this fictional character is a vision of ecological and cultural salvaging that his narrative articulates. An illustrated bestiary that accompanies the novel and that appeared online clarifies this idea. Cataloging over 30 creatures, the bestiary mixes living biological species with both engineered and fantastical ones. There are company-made memory beetles and eel-like things who carry MCD, Born's publisher, as a cryptic signature. There are fireflies who are the work of amateur bioengineers, and there is a type of flounder who is a dual-purpose fish and living map. Then there are the many supernatural creatures, from the biblical Leviathan to the fire slug, a magical creature believed to be found in the Amazon and well known to Harry Potter fans. There is the blue fox who had slipped over from another world and who calls up the Icelandic trickster figure known as Skuggabaldur. And there is the company's own one-off fox who glows with a quiet bioluminescence. As the Leviathan and blue fox underscore, literary allusions abound in the bestiary, and so too in the novel proper. These allusions index both anthropocentrism and Eurocentric cultural legacies that ultimately leave Born cold. Born grows restless with a library of books that he assembles from the abandoned apartment complex where he lives with Rachel and Wick. At first, upon devouring this archive, cognitively and physically, Born reports to Rachel, "I'm learning too much. I feel it filling me up and I can't stop." With time, though, he views the found library as limiting In its artifacts, Bourne sees himself only in the figure of weapon and the world around him only in the story of a post-apocalyptic planet. Bourne senses that these are not the only stories to tell. His intuition leads to a kind of field work, a multisensory practice of knowing and living in this time and place. This practice involves rambles across the city during which Bourne often experiences and participates in its culture of survivalism and violence. But his immersion in the city leads to the ad hoc formation of multi-species community, a community that includes both other company castoffs and wildlife. These rambles further engender new narratives of the city's engineered ruins and surviving ecologies, as Bourne gathers together artifacts and begins to keep a diary. A found object thus becomes an archivist, an artist, a storyteller. In writing about Bourne as part of my book project Novel Ecologies, this speculative fiction has become a touchstone for the environmental humanities and arts, as not just multidisciplinary areas of research and creativity, but also as multisensory practices of salvaging livable communities from unlivable conditions. This provisional idea of sensing and salvaging livability rather than sustainability suggests that researchers situated in academic fields like the environmental humanities look to the arts not just for cultural archives and objects of analysis, but also as collaborators and co-instigators in fostering what Stephanie Lemenager terms new socialities. Such collaborations are, of course, well underway, as reflected in the people and projects who've been convened for this event, Climate Sensing and Data Storytelling, and shown in the exhibit. Lemenager captures the spirit of such efforts in a recent essay that outlines a disposition for the environmental humanities, one that speaks from disciplines rather than to them. She elaborates, the environmental humanities has been tried out on the ground, in college and university classrooms, and in public spaces like museums and even beaches, prior to its articulation as an academic field. There is and has been an everyday environmental humanities, worked out in earnest and at times awkward collaboration among artists and scholars, reaching across the so-called two cultures from the humanities into the social and natural sciences, end quote. With this as conceptual framing, I'll turn by way of further illustration to the environmental arts and humanities practice of Marinas Urquelle. Last year, I and others at Lens had the opportunity to collaborate with Urquelle and the culinary duo Hank and Bean on a project titled Making the Best of It, Nimble Foods for Climate Chaos. Documentation from our collaboration is part of the Climate Sensing Data Storytelling Gallery. Urquelle and her partners have conveyed the stakes of the project as an ongoing experiment in metabolizing climate disruptions and cultivating agility. They feel they do this by way of novel but accessible snack foods shared in public gatherings that hope to ground environmental crises in intimate and visceral experiences at living better together. The snack prototypes, in the case of our collaboration, they were jellyfish jerky, feature edible species that scientists have flagged as indicators of anthropogenic climate change. These include native populations of species who are flourishing as a result of drought, warming, or habitat degradation, along with introduced species better adapted than native ones to disturbed ecosystems. Drawing from different cultural foodways, the snacks aim to connect climate forecasts and food science with performance and social practice art. As this project suggests, Urquelle is an environmental artist who works extensively with researchers and educators, ranging from theater scholars and anthropologists to ecologists and climate scientists. She also works with environmental NGOs and community groups and with other creative practitioners. Her robustly collaborative work challenges and redefines the boundaries, not just between art and academic research, but also between social practice art and social movement building. This fall, Urquelle joined a seminar I taught for a discussion of her 2012 project, Mesocosm, Wink, Texas. In her conversation with us, she highlighted both hand-drawn sketches she made and found imagery and objects she gathered in developing this multimedia work about an oil refinery community and prairie ecosystem in Northwest Texas that has extensive groundwater contamination due to refinery pollution and waste storage. Urquelle recounted the fieldwork she did in Wink as part of this research, work that was guided by the founder of a local scrappy nature conservancy. In sharing these facets of her process with us, she explained that the final algorithmic video work draws on, as data, this collection of drawings and found materials that she assembled during her time in Wink and afterward. These discrete elements of the piece are animated into a visual and sonic narrative, one that enlivens a multi-species community constituted by traces of the people, plants, wildlife, oil and gas infrastructures, and climate conditions of Wink, together with the viewers and environs in which the piece has variously been shown. Here's the explanatory text that accompanies Mesocosm, which to watch a full cycle requires almost a week of your time. The title is drawn from the field of environmental science and refers to experimental simulated ecosystems, which will allow for manipulation of the physical environment and are used for biological community and ecological research. Because change happens slowly, but can be radical over time, the works are intended to be seen in public places where people gather or pass through frequently, or lived with like a painting in living rooms and meeting spaces. In the animation, a large sinkhole, the Wink Sink 2, located on private oil company property in the small Texas town of Wink, boils, gushes, flows, and expels objects, plastic bags, oil and dark clouds that whirl out of the sinkhole's vortex in ghostly choreography. Oil refineries burn off gases in plumes in the background as an occasional train or coyote lumbers past. This sinkhole has been widening steadily since it emerged in 2002. Here, it appears as a natural geological event, complete with picnic rest stop furnishings. By day, the landscape is inhabited by a diversity of bird life, prairie dogs, insects, pronghorn antelope, hazmat workers, and depending on the season, by migrating monarch butterflies, snakes, and sandhill cranes. I'll now play just a short clip from one recording of the animation. So what makes this work exemplary of what I've characterized as climate salvage and sensory art and in turn a template for building and imagining livable worlds. On the one hand, Urquelle adapts specific experimental practices of scientific research, in particular the design of small-scale model ecosystems, or mesocosms, in which to study the impacts of all kinds of change and transformation. The project adapts the mesocosm method to observe and to make visible the incremental stochastic impacts of petrochemical pollution, what Rob Nixon has termed slow violence, and what Luminager envisions as living oil. On the other hand, Urquelle's data-driven algorithmic video work assumes that no single field of research or knowledge is sufficient to address or to redress the consequences of oil and gas refining. Nixon's account of the tactics that writer-activists have employed to document, confront, and redress the harms of oil and gas was in fact an influence on the project. Attentive to the limits of disciplinary knowledge and to the social and ecological consequences of petrocapitalism, Mesocosm takes shape as a long-duration installation that immerses audiences in the seasonal ecology and contaminated ground of Wink, Texas. Urquelle notes that its form aims partly to bore participant viewers, by which I take her to mean that we are meant to live with and feel a part of this place rather than consume it as spectacle. In the end, no one person could have made Mesocosm, and no one person likely has experienced a complete and always changing 146-hour cycle of the animation. Collective and open-ended, Mesocosm is a kind of climate salvage. It generates from the detritus of an industrial sublime, to quote Urquelle, consideration of a place that has been treated as an extractive resource, and helps to make that place seen as a living, breathing community, both now and in the future. Thank you so much.